Perfect. Perfect. One of the greatest benefits of the HDZero system is its fixed and low latency transmission system. That makes it the VTX protocol of choice for racers and proximity pilots alike. Well, Emax has noticed this competitive advantage and designed the perfect drone around this HDZero system in the Hawk Apex. So let's take a closer look at this drone and see if it has the right parts. So here it is, the Emax Hawk Apex, the drone designed specifically for racing. And this thing looks pretty cool here in the front here with this red painted carbon fiber here and all this red on here, making it look very, very racy. Now on the top here, you have all the different options for this drone. Now the Hawk Apex comes in multiple versions, one as a 3.5-inch drone as well as a 5-inch drone. We have the 5-inch drone version today, as well as a 4S or a 6S version. Now this can come also as a plug and play or as a bind and fly. We do have the 6S version with the bind and fly version. This one does have an express LRS receiver built into it. So let's take a look at this and see what's inside. Take the sleeve off. All right, so you're greeted by some cards here, disclaimer cards, some stickers, and some QR codes here to go to their social media site. Okay, so under this foam pad, you have the drone presentation here with the propellers. This is pretty cool. And we have 6 propellers, so we have 2 extras. Pretty cool that Emax included some extras on here. And then you have some screws here for your propellers. Then you have your drone right here, pretty awesome. Just pull this out. It's packed in here pretty well with this foam, so the cutout is pretty nice. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the Hawk Apex here. This is the 5-inch version. You can see it's a little bit bigger. And the first thing that jumps out to me is how small this body is, the top plate, as well as the painting on this drone. Pretty cool. You have all this red painting here on the carbon, as well as underneath, giving it a very nice little racy feel to it. Really, really nice drone, but the size of this thing, it's really, really small, very, very light. Now, Emax said this thing weighs 167 grams. So let's take a closer look at it and see if that's accurate. Definitely under 250 grams, it feels so light. And let's see what this thing says. So there you go, 167, so 1 gram lighter than advertised. Now the final weight of the drone is going to vary depending on what battery you use. Obviously this is the 6S version. Typically 6S batteries are pretty heavy, guys, so most likely you are going to be over the 250 gram limit on this drone here. Now the next thing I noticed on here, besides just the small size of this body, is the camera on here. This thing protrudes out here with this TPU on here. This is the RunCam Nano, and I've used this before multiple times on different drones. This one gives a pretty decent image on here. Like I said earlier, you have this TPU mount on here to protect this in case of a crash. Usually racing drones go really, really quick, and they are prone to accidents if it hits a gate or hits the ground. And this camera here is very protected in case that does happen. Now besides that, you can see that the angle on here is pretty high, and this thing has really good range of adjustment because these things fly really, really fast. So I can see that this thing goes really, really up there. So in case you want to have a really good angle for your speed, and you can see this thing is kind of level right here. So you can see the kind of angle this drone here will be flying with the high speed. As well, it can go down to something, well, it actually goes down below the level of the drone. So you can actually see it a little bit down, but that means you're not going to be flying fast. But there's a wide range of adjustment on this camera, and that's pretty cool and appreciated, especially when you're flying a fast drone. Now connected to the camera is the VTX. This is the Whoop VTX by HDZero. This one here is capable of 200 milliwatts, and that's more than adequate for this style of drone since most racers use 25 watts when they're racing. Now connected to the VTX is your VTX antenna here. This is an Emax 5.8 gig antenna, and that should be pretty good. We'll see how this works once we take it for a flight. But as you can see, it's very, very short and small, meaning that it should be durable, and it's a little bit lower so it doesn't receive much damage when you're crashing. Now below the VTX is the actual flight controller ESC stack. Now this is it all-in-one. It's the F722 flight controller with 25 amp ESCs. Now 25 amp seems kind of low for a 5-inch drone, but because this thing here is so light, this should be adequate for these motors and for this whole sub here. But it's kind of weird to hear 25 amps in a 5-inch drone. Now talking about the ESC and the amperage from them, they're connected to these motors here. These are the Emax Eco 2 motors. These are the 2204, 1600 kV. So yes, a 6S as we talked about earlier. And they're very, very small and light, which makes this thing very peppy. Now we'll see how this thing here works if there's enough torque and RPM to carry the whole setup on here. But I suspect that should be adequate, guys. The interesting thing about this one though is the mounting solution on here. Typically you'll have a nut on here, but they went with a T-mount on here, which is very, very different for a 5-inch drone. And we'll see if there's any kind of durability issues with that. These shafts look really, really small. Looks like 1.5, maybe 2 millimeters. I think they look like 1.5 millimeters though. And we'll see how this thing behaves in a crash if any of these are gonna get bent. Now coming to the back here, you have the antenna for your receiver, and this drone specifically is equipped with an Express LRS receiver, 2.4 gigahertz, which is really, really good for racing, very low latency, and probably the perfect fit for this kind of drone. Now this drone is also sold as a plug and play, meaning there's no receiver. You can put your favorite receiver in here, say Crossfire or maybe FR Sky. Then that option is also available to you, but I would highly recommend you go with the Express LRS. It's very, very light, compact, and very, very powerful. It has good range. Finally, you have your battery lead here for your flight controller and ESC. And as you can see, it has a big capacitor on here, but the interesting thing is it has a XT30 connector on here. As I said before, a very, very interesting design and cues on here, but most 6S batteries come with an XT60 plug, so most likely I have to get an adapter, which I do have already, and then put it to convert from XT60 to XT30. But it is only 25 amp draw max, so I guess XT30 shouldn't be a problem. Now to the center here, you have these two pads here, and this is for your battery. This is where you're gonna mount your battery for your drone. And this is very typical of a racing drone where you have the battery below the actual drone. Besides that, you have this 2-piece bottom plate here, and I thought it was 1 piece, but it's actually a sandwich plate on here. And it looks pretty good, guys. Emax usually makes pretty good frames and usually resistant to breaking or cracking as well as vibration. This thing here is very, very stiff, guys. So really, really simple, but it makes sense. Really simple, but cool design. Everything looks clean. One thing on the side here, you do have a port here for your firmware update to update the VTX, which is pretty cool. And everything else is protected. Really, really nice. You have your MIPI cable here, and we talked about the camera before. So very simple, but I'm sure the ingredients and the design of this is perfect for racing. So let's put a battery on this and take it for a flight. Okay, so we're back from our test flight, and the Hawk Apex did a pretty amazing job, guys. Really, really good performing drone here. So let's start up by talking about the flight characteristics. Now, I flew this with a 6S 1250 milliamp hour battery, and this thing felt really, really light, guys. Surprisingly light for the size and the battery that's on this. This thing here is really good, not too twitchy, but it responds immediately. Whether you move the throttle or the controls, this thing moves really, really fast. Now, this is really good if you're a racer or if you just have fast reflexes and trying to get around a course. This thing is really good in that manner, really, really good. Now, I'm not a racer by any means, but you can see why that could be useful on a racetrack. Now, having said all that, this drone here accelerates really, really quickly, which is a characteristic you want in a racing drone. Now, that's pretty cool because you do have this tilt angle here on the camera. And I noticed that a few times as I was flying, I was looking more at the ground, trying to get some more speed, and I came back, increased the angle even more. And this thing just encourages you to fly this thing even faster. Really, really good drone. And it does inspire some confidence, but it does push you to the limits of your flying skills and the drone. Now, throughout my time flying this drone, never once did this thing freak out. The flight control on here is really good with a good tune on here. And yeah, it does inspire confidence. It does track straight. The one thing I did notice though, because it feels so light, sometimes in a corner or taking a corner and you want to accelerate, if you don't have that tilt in there, it does want to balloon up a little bit, especially in the corners. But as I said, I'm not a racer, and I'm sure you guys have some tricks or some tips to prevent it from happening. That's kind of expected, I would guess, in a racing drone of this caliber. Besides that, I did take this drone for some freestyle maneuvers and it handled it really, really well. As I said before, the tuner here is pretty good. The flight controller didn't freak out, and this thing is like a dream to fly. This thing is so maneuverable. Whatever you put into it, it just keeps it there and it can handle it, a dive, climb, whatever you want. So yeah, this is a pretty awesome drone, and Emax did a really good job putting the tune on this one. Now, talking about speed, the powertrain on this drone here is pretty awesome. When I first unboxed it, I kind of thought that these motors here were gonna be a little bit too small for a 5-inch drone and for these propellers, but I was surprised. These things worked really, really well. There was adequate torque I can get out of situations. If I did a dive or I made a mistake, I could correct. And I was also intrigued by that because of the lower amp on the ESCs, but this combination here was adequate. In fact, it did prove to be an advantage because I did have some better battery life because of these smaller motors and this lower amp on the ESCs. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the battery life from this drone. Now, changing gear, the Hawk Apex is equipped with the HDZero digital system, and that's the perfect VTX or digital system for this drone. We're talking about a system with low and consistent latency, which is really good for racing or flying within proximity to objects or the ground. Now, this thing here is equipped with the VTX, which is good for 200 milliwatts. I never wanted to have an issue with it. We have this small stubby antenna on here, which is good, very short and very durable. Now, this performed very well. It performed as well or better than the other 200 milliwatt VTX in the market, but never wanted to have an issue with it. Now, I flew this drone with both the Transporter 2 HD as well as the new HDZero goggles, and I had a perfect, experience flying with these two goggles. Now, obviously, if you're gonna fly this in the race course, you're gonna be limited to around 25 milliwatts, but at that point, you'll be closer to this drone here, and I don't suspect you're gonna have any issues flying this at 25 milliwatts. So props to Emax for including the HDZero system in a bind and fly, and it is the perfect system for a racing drone of this caliber, guys. Now, as mentioned earlier, this drone here flies pretty fast, and you are gonna have a really good angle while you're flying and accelerating. And the camera adjustment on this drone is phenomenal, guys. This thing is really steep. We're talking about somewhere around 45 degrees of angle, probably even more. That gives you a really good angle while you're flying and still be able to see forward. So really cool adjustment on here. If you want to fly slow, which is not a really characteristic of a racing drone, then you can lower this very low, even below the horizon, guys. So you can do some really slow flights. And I did that as well, just to test the reception of my antenna and the VTX, and that worked out pretty well. So the adjustment on the angle here, really good. The camera here is really good as well. The only thing is that you can't change this camera here to a 4:3 aspect ratio, but besides that, it is a really good camera. I've used this before, and it works really well. Now, coming to the back here, you have your receiver, which is the Express LRS receiver on here. Now, the Hawk Apex comes both as a plug and play and as a bind and fly. Now, I have the bind and fly version here with the Express LRS receiver, and this is a perfect match. I wouldn't recommend any other receiver besides an Express LRS receiver. That's really good for refresh rates, give you really instant feedback as you move the controls on the stick. And yeah, really good range and penetration. All these things you want to have while racing a drone on the track, maybe a little bit further away from you. You don't want to have sluggish commands or response, and you want it to be instant, and you want to have a strong link. Now, I flew this all over my park, guys, but the link quality was superb, solid. We do have this external antenna on here, and the link quality stayed around 100% throughout my whole flight, guys. So never wanted to dip below that, which is a really good sign, and I've never had any bad issues with external antennas. I'm flying around 150 milliwatts, which is adequate, guys. So I don't suspect to have any issues with the receiver on this drone. Okay, let's talk about the battery life on the Hawk Apex. Now, this comes both as a 3.5-inch drone as well as the 5-inch drone. I have the 5-inch version here, as well as a 4S version and a 6S version. Now, I have the top of the line model here. This is the 5-inch version with a 6S power plant. I did use a 6S 1250 milliamp hour battery, and I did have really good performance, guys. This thing blew me away. I'll state again, I'm not a racer by any means, but I did fly this in mixed conditions, whether it be cruising as well as some aggressive flying, doing some aggressive turns, a lot of high-end throttle, and this thing performed really well. No battery sag. These motors are really good. The ESC did a good job, and I was averaging around 10 minutes or 10 plus minutes on my flights, guide. So maybe if you're flying this more aggressively, you might reduce that to around 8 minutes. But that's simply amazing, guys. Obviously, guys or people aren't racing 8 minutes at a time, but I'm sure you can get away easily with, you know, some 4-minute times, and this shouldn't be a problem. Do a couple laps, and that's good. If you really want to practice and train, then there you go. You can put a big battery in this, like I have a 1250. And honestly, guys, that's a heavy battery and this thing still felt light. So if you put a lighter battery on here, you probably get some more maneuverability. This thing will be more eager, probably a faster drone. You might have obviously reduced battery or flight times, but that is also possible. Talking about that, I did have to switch the battery strap on mine. The battery strap that came with this was a little bit too long, even for a 6S battery. So I did have to change that. And while we're here, let's talk about this connector here, this XT30 connector on here. Now, this is a 5-inch drone and also a 6S drone at that. And I'm kind of surprised that they use a XT30 connector on here, only because the majority of batteries in the market comes with the XT60 connector. So that's something you have to consider about. You might have to buy some special batteries. In my case, I did use an adapter. That works really well, and you can get those anywhere in the market. I'll probably leave some link down below if you want to use those. So you have to consider that. But it's a very interesting choice by Emax to use an XT30 connector. But having said that, on their defense though, this is a smaller motor, light prop, a light drone, and a smaller ESC. So probably there isn't any need for a bigger connector on there. But at the same time, just for convenience and compatibility, I do wish it was a larger connector on this. Now, durability is a big concern of any drone, and this drone here, the Apex, is no exception. Now, I've flown this multiple times and had numerous crashes, whether it be into the grass rolling or crash into a tree. That was my most violent crash. And this thing held up very well. Everything looks pretty good. My last crash was a pretty violent crash into a Florida palm tree, and it held up pretty well. It hit the tree and hit concrete, actually. And these arms are pretty good. Now, Emax makes pretty good frames, guys, but this thing is durable, which is what you want in a racing drone. You're flying really close to gates or objects, and you're flying close to the ground. So you do want to have a durable drone, and I have to say that this drone is durable. Now, I did have some bent props. Never once did I break any props. You can see right here, there's a little bit tip on here, so I did have to change 2 propellers on here, and you can see they're all kind of scratched up a little bit as I hit that palm tree. But this drone here is, yeah, seriously durable on here. It's very light too and small and compact, so there's not too many parts to break on this drone. Another concern of mine was these smaller motor shafts in here hitting the ground. Maybe it could bend a motor shaft, but these things, they look pretty good. Very interesting design as well with this T mounting on the props and on the motors, but they work pretty well. It's just very kind of inconvenient to screw them on and unscrew them to line the holes up. But besides that, you know, no issues at all. So I do have to buy some more propellers. The lens is really protected here with this TPU mount on here. So you have really good adjustment and you have protection on the camera on here. So really good design here by Emax, and this drone here is, yeah, I'd say fully protected, guys. Really durable. So having said all that, what do I think about the Emax Hawk Apex? Well, I do think that this is an amazing drone. It's a purpose-built drone made for racing, and it has all the right parts and ingredients to make this a good beginner racing drone. Now, this thing here, I said before, is a pretty fast drone, and if you want anything more advanced or even faster, then that would require the assistance of you creating or building your custom racing drone. But besides that, this is a perfect start if you're interested in racing. If you're racing on the simulators and you want to do the real thing, this is the perfect step for you. Everything here is done for you. Everything is on here. The tune is on here. Good camera, really light drone, 6S, 4S, 5-inch or 3.5-inch drone. You have many options on here, guys. So let me know what you think about this Hawk Apex. Are you interested in this? What do you think about the performance on this, guys? Now, if you're in the market for a new goggles to complement your new Hawk Apex or any HDZero for that matter, I have two right here. I have the Transporter 2 HD by Emax. It's a really affordable option that really converts into a field monitor. Really good for spectators. It's a really versatile goggles. And I have the new HDZero goggles here. A little bit more premium options, really good performing, and has a lot of capabilities and features that can be compatible with other VRXs on the market. I've done full reviews on these two goggles, and I'll leave them linked right here. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.